I'm here with JR, who has, I think, entered the microacquire legendary club. He has sold or he has microacquired five different startups
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
have had five different startups microacquired.
Hmm.
That's incredible, man. So
Thanks.
thanks so much for joining the podcast.
It's great to be here. Yep.
So for those listening, do you want to just give everyone just a quick background on yourself, and maybe we can dive into the some of the acquisitions in a second?
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been working with startups for a while now. I started my first project. I'm going to call it a project now. When I was 16, and I'm 28 now, so that's about 12 years ago. I was still in high school when I started that, and kind of been in and out of the startup world. I've had a few jobs in between. The first site that I actually got micro acquired was a productized service. I started in 2020. Yeah, so I was working a job. I was head of customer success for a company, and it's a really shit job. So I started
So,
working on this productized service, which is funny because we launched on Product Hunt, and I remember you specifically. You were one of the first commenters. You congratulated us on the launch.
oh,
So it's
nice.
funny that 6 months after launching that service, we ended up getting micro acquired. Yeah, that was really cool.
Small world. Yeah, I always give like shout outs when I can. That's
Yeah.
rad, man. Well, congrats on making the leap into entrepreneurship and then acquisitions too. So tell me about so you got five acquisitions on your belt under Microcore. I think that might be the record. Tell me about your favorite
Probably.
one. What's been
Mhm.
maybe the most meaningful in terms of size or just
I think
whatever however you define meaningful.
I think the most meaningful would be my most recent one. It's called Insanely Useful Websites. It's a newsletter. And I wasn't really planning on selling this one, to be very honest. I started this about 8 months ago. So December 21, I started this. And it's been growing really well. It's been doing really well. We had just under 5,000 subscribers. I had absolutely no inclination of selling it till about a few days ago, and I said, you know what, let's see what's out there. I'd heard of a few newsletters being sold, so I said, okay, let's list it on Microacquire. Let's list it on a few websites, see what kind of interest we get, and then we can make a decision. 24 hours later, 24 hours after listing on Microacquire, not only did I have a few people who were interested in buying, but I actually had my first real offer within 24 hours, which was absolutely insane. It was
Whoa.
just shy of the asking price, and the asking price was a really decent multiple. So it was something that I was very happy to sell at. So that was within 24 hours, and it went super quickly. So when everything kind of fell into place, I had a chat with the buyer, and he seemed like the right person to take over. So I said, "Excellent, it feels right now." So within 24 hours, it went from something I wasn't really looking to sell to it being the right fit.
That is crazy. 24 hours in terms of an
Yeah.
acquisition. That
Yep.
may also be the fastest acquisition I've heard of.
It did take a week to close, to be honest. We signed contracts within 24 hours, but with payments and everything, it took a lot. It took a bit longer.
Nice. What would you say your second favorite acquisition on Microcore has been?
The second favorite would be that would be my first one. Simply because it was my first exit on Microacquire. It was also within 6 months, so it's funny. I mean, you might be listening to me say, I'm selling a website in 6 months, so I built this one. I sold it after 8 months, but the reasoning behind that is very much that I'm trying to kind of build a micro startup studio almost. So more like a build to sell model. And using kind of sites like Microacquire to achieve that, or at least that's where I see this going. So yeah.
Nice. So tell me about how many buyers reached out to you in those 24 hour in that 24-hour period.
In those 24 hours, not a lot, but that was because I didn't give it enough time. Once you receive an LOI, and then it kind of pauses any interest, doesn't it? But within those 24 hours, I received about, I think, 8 requests or 9 requests.
Nice. Yeah, you didn't give us enough time to put you
I
in the
didn't give enough
newsletter, the social media posts.
time.
So you might have had like probably more than you might have
I've
wanted
had,
to maybe.
for previous ones, I've had loads. I've had 30, 40. I've had loads of requests. So I agree with that. I didn't give you enough time.
Have you gotten your microcore swag yet?
I haven't received it. I filled out that form a while ago.
Uh,
I
it,
thought you don't ship to the UK. I just assumed you didn't ship it.
No, I will make sure we get a huge swag box out to you. Because that's incredible, and I'm super happy for you.
It
Um,
better have some sort of title for the two records you said.
we'll send you some title belts or something like that. But if someone beats you, you got to send them back to me so I can give them to the next person. Um,
Excellent.
but tell me about, when you list on microacquire, what are some tips you'd maybe give, other people looking to sell their startups?
I think a few things I'd say is definitely have your numbers ready. Um, in my case, I've never really been a big numbers guy, and I always try to keep things as simple as possible. And it's more like a cowboy tactic almost. I try to not create P&Ls and all of that jazz. But having those things handy really helps, especially when you start receiving offers and when you start receiving LOIs. So have your numbers ready. Know your numbers, know how much money you've made. Also, don't fudge numbers. I think any serious buyer can really easily find that out, especially in due diligence. So if you've lied about your profits, or if you've lied about the amount of money you're spending, for example, on actually hosting a website, etc., it really does. It can affect an acquisition. I've heard of many stories where acquisitions haven't happened because either the seller tried lying about something, or they just didn't have the numbers ready. So yeah, have your numbers ready, and don't lie. just keep it straightforward, keep it truthful. Also, I'd say don't try asking for. You see a lot of sellers trying to kind of they're asking for valuations which really don't make sense. They ask for multiples that are way above what something would be worth. So it makes sense to kind of keep things achievable. It makes sense to kind of keep things realistic as well, and look at your profit multiples and then see if listing it makes sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on both points. There's a saying, there's been more lies told in Excel than Word.
Yeah.
So definitely, yeah. And then also a good quote to go along with that is from Warren Buffett: "You can't do a good deal with a bad person." So if
Yeah,
you're
exactly. Yeah.
if you're, and yes, it will easily be caught in due diligence. So I highly do not recommend that. And then in terms of valuations, yeah, we see that a lot. And so what I always recommend founders is we have a multiples report out which is real data from real acquisitions done on microacquire. And if you
Yeah.
follow that guide, your chances of being acquired are, 100 times higher. But there's kind of like, it's hard when you see large companies being valued in the venture
Yeah.
world at this and stuff like that. It's the hardest part of the job. And as a founder, I've done this myself, where you think, well, they sold for 20x revenue, why
Yeah.
can't I? But it doesn't really work like that.
No.
Like, your business is your business. Is it at scale? There's so many different factors that go into
Yeah.
valuing your business. And I even recommend sometimes to price lower than you might expect, because then you'll draw on more buyers. There's another saying:
100%.
if you have one buyer, you have no buyers. And so if you can get a bidding war going with a timeline saying, hey, I'm looking to sell this asset or this startup by this certain date, you can get multiple LOIs, and it gives you a lot of leverage to raise the price. And you're kind of letting the market tell you what the business is worth.
100%. Yeah, I think it's perfect to kind of let the market do that. But yes, as for individual sellers, I think it's very easy to be greedy. As you said, especially if you see your neighbor, for example, getting acquired for 20x. But it's really important kind of to keep things in perspective and see, do you have the business that that kind of gets that kind of valuation, or do you need something that closer to 5 or 6x? But yeah, I've seen you have a ton of resources, and that's actually really helpful, considering that a lot of people selling are first time selling.
Nice. And then in terms of like when you're speaking with buyers, what advice would you give buyers? Because I know a lot of buyers, I've seen buyers reach out, send LOIs too soon, short messages, and all that really turns off a founder, and it would
Yeah,
turn off me, because it's just weird if they just are, hey, give me all this information without
yeah.
actually, showing that they're interested. What advice would you give to buyers to really pique your
Um,
interest and help them stand out?
well, I'll come to that in a second. But speaking of buyers, yeah, there's some real tire kickers out there, I have to say. So one of the tricks, and this is for sellers, and I just wanted to mention this, one of the tricks I realized early on, I think it was after the first sale, was always ask for the buyer to jump on a call if they're interested, because anyone who's kicking the tire, anyone who's not interested is not going to go forward. Because there's a ton of people who might reach out, but at the end of the day, they're not really interested. So if you're a seller listening to this, and you have a buyer who reaches out, and you're kind of on the fence about whether they're interested, before you send them any information, just send them the basics and see if they want to jump on a call. That potentially helps. And there's also always that one buyer who tries to lowball you. Every time I've listed a startup, without fail, there's always that one person who lowballs you with like a 1.5x multiple or a 2x multiple. It just says your startup isn't worth what you're asking for. I'll pay you this much. So don't fall for them, even if they come in early, even if they come in within a few days of you listing. Don't fall for those. If you think a startup's worth something, stick it out. Wait for it. One of my websites took 3 months to sell, but it was worth it. So it can take time. It can happen in 24 hours. It can happen in a few weeks or a few months. But don't let lowball offers demotivate you or kind of trick you into selling for less than you're worth.
I like that.
But going back to your question about the buyers, I think buyers don't need to pique my interest, really. All buyers need to do is say, "Look, I'm interested in buying." that's enough to pique my interest. But yeah, I think the previous point about lowball offers, it's almost it's like a big turnoff. If you're serious about buying my business, don't insult me by offering something that it's not. I'm not going to take the conversation forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. One trick that I recommend as well, if I love the getting to know the buyer too, because you're going to be working with this person post transaction, transferring the assets, that sort of stuff. So again, going back to Warren Buffett's quote, you want to do a good deal with a good person, in my opinion. And one thing,
that's a really good quote.
It's Warren Buffett.
But, I want that on my
t-shirt. Some other tips we recommend is, if a seller reaches out, make them kind of perform. And what I mean by that is, they reach out with like, "Hey, my name is JR. I have experience in marketing. I love your newsletter." Your next question should be, "That's awesome. What specifically would you like to know about the startup?" Or, how do you, if we do get to the finish line, how are you going to fund this acquisition? Okay, great. Are you comfortable signing an NDA? And what you're doing is you're making the buyer perform in terms of, okay, you have experience. Okay, this is how we're going to fund it. Okay, you're comfortable signing an NDA. And all you're doing is just keeping a quick conversation going with the buyer to kind of gauge their interest level. And a lot will drop off if they're not interested. And that allows you to just focus on the ones that are interested. So that's another tip that I've heard.
Just getting those small commitments as well, isn't it? It kind of plays into the art of persuasion, just getting the small commitments and keeping the conversation going. Yeah.
All you're doing is saying, like, "Are you serious? Are you serious about this opportunity? Are you serious about this opportunity? Are you serious about?" And then they say yes, yes, yes. And then you also kind of get to know, information that you probably want to know, like how you gonna finance this. So all that fun stuff. So you are probably the definition of a serial entrepreneur. Building and selling.
Not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's a great thing. We've seen that quite a bit on Microacquire, where people are building projects and then selling them, and building is one of the funnest parts about a startup, in my opinion. The initial phase. So
I love the first 6 months.
it can be addicting. So I'd love to know. What are you working on now?
So a couple of things, really. I have a couple of productized services, but as I mentioned before, I'm kind of trying to pivot my work into building almost like a micro startup studio, so which focuses on projects that are built to sell, so purpose built to sell within a year or 2 years. Which is, it kind of came to me last year when. If you're familiar with like the build to sell in 30 days kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I did build to sell in 30 way before build to sell in 30 was a thing. So last year in July, I built a startup and sold it on Microacquire within 30 days.
Well done.
And that kind of gave me, thank you. I hope that's another that's another title coming my way. But that kind of gave me an idea. I said, okay, this is really interesting, because what a lot of people are searching for is proof of concept, validation from customers, an MVP built out, and kind of that early job done. So launching a few places and getting those customers and getting the product to a place where now someone can come in, take over the processes and what you've built, and then scale it. So that kind of gave me an idea to start building a micro startup studio. So what I'm trying to do now is building micro products for the purpose of selling them within the next year or 2 years. And by products, it's a general term. But what I mean is it could be productized services. So I run 2 productized services. One's in the cold email space, one's in like the Webflow development space. I run info products, content businesses, and another newsletter. So similar to the one that I just sold. And it's all kind of leading to that point. But yeah, it's very easy to overstretch yourself, which I think I've done a few times.
I think every entrepreneur has, but this is awesome. It's almost like I can see a future where people are able to build products specifically to sell them to someone else, and then you get to go back to doing what you love, which is building more products.
Exactly. It's all about playing to your strengths, right? I'm not the person to take a business from 100,000 to 10 million, but I might be the person to take it from 0 to 100,000, and then someone else can come in and do what they do best, which is scale it further. And I've seen lots of people struggle with starting. Starting sometimes for many people is the hardest bit. And if you can take that away from, if you can take that initial, it's getting that inertia. It's the hardest part to get the ball rolling, to get the car moving. And once you get it started, and someone else can come in.
Nice. I like that a lot. So I guess final questions I would have for you is how did you learn all this stuff? Like, are there any books you'd recommend or podcasts that you listen to?
YouTube. YouTube is by far my favorite resource. Everything's on there. I do listen to a few podcasts. They're great for listening to, not necessarily for learning, but My First Million, that's one of them. I really do like that podcast. But yeah, YouTube has so many people who are just freely sharing all their knowledge and kind of what they're learning. In fact, I started my no-code journey looking at YouTube tutorials based on what people, how they were building on Webflow and all these different apps. So YouTube, I mean, that's all you need, really. You don't need anything else.
That's incredible today, because 10 years ago, we did not have that. Building a startup 10 years ago, everyone was just trying to figure it out. Like, we had some idea. Like I built a startup and launched it in 2010, and there was not a lot of content on sales, marketing. Everyone was just kind of, maybe this will work, or
and it was at that time, it was the same old books being recommended. It's like, oh yeah, I don't know if I should name names, but I'll name them anyway. You can edit them out. There were, I think, Steve Blank had a book. What was it called?
I remember that.
And then there was something about the peaks and the. I have all these books.
Crossing the Chasm.
Yeah, that's the one.
And Steve Blank's book is like The Path to Epiphany, I think.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah.
Yes,
there were all these books.
I read those in college. Like
every one at that stage, I think, was reading those books, hoping that there is an epiphany at the end. But
I will say, at the time, those were great books. But then, as what's been, I think, really amazing to see, and I think this is what I love most about startups personally, is just how much other entrepreneurs share, like yourself. Like, you're giving fantastic, even though you just said YouTube, that is a great tip. Like, just go on YouTube. Like,
just go on YouTube.
Like, sometimes
I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah, or Google. Sometimes I'll post something on, say, Twitter, and someone will have a very basic question. I'll just say, type it into Google. And if you literally copy and paste the question into Google, you'll get tons of content. You can do it on YouTube.
Which is funny. I think you almost need more people. More people need to oversimplify stuff, because I think at this point most people tend to overcomplicate stuff. It just doesn't need to be that complicated.
Yeah, I think there's beauty in simplicity.
100%.
I think that was Steve Jobs' motto in terms of, what could he remove from products rather than add to product. And I think
I'm going to give you that quote. I think Beauty and Simplicity by Gad.
No, I think it's like a famous artist. It's a quote from someone.
That's going on my coffee mug.
The mug require coffee mug when we get it out too.
Excellent.
All right, Jared. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, dude. I'm just so thrilled at all your success, and I'm rooting for you. If people want to
Thank
learn
you.
more about your journey or learn about more about your new projects, where can they go?
I think Twitter would be best. I'm definitely trying to be a bit more active there. So yeah, just follow me on Twitter. I think you can leave a link in the description. That should be easiest.
I'll look up a YouTube tutorial on how to leave a link on a YouTube video.
Just Google
For,
it. Just Google
just go
it.
throwing it right back at me. All right, JR. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'll put all of the links in the show notes. But man, congrats again, and we'll definitely
Thanks.
be getting I think we owe you like 4 swag boxes, so you might be getting a big
The thing
shipment
is,
soon.
yes, it's recorded now, so once it's up on YouTube, you can't go back.
I'm a man of my word.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Andrew. Have a nice one.
You too. All right, cheers, JR.
All right. Cheers. Bye.